Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm delighted you can be with us today. You know, the close community of afterlife researchers has been maturing wonderfully in the 50 years that I've been a part of it. I began to do what felt to me like serious research, believe it or not, in the late 1960s. But there wasn't much to find, and it wasn't until Dr. Raymond Moody's wonderful book, Life After Life, came out in 1975, and he introduced the concept of near-death experiences, and he even coined the term near-death experiences. It wasn't until then that the floodgates opened. There was a lot being published then, a lot of interest in the afterlife in general, in what happens at and after death. So I spent decades reading just all these new books that came out at the end of the 70s and in the 80s, and then I'd read whatever I could find of all the books that they listed in their bibliographies. By the late 80s, I had put together what I thought was a pretty good understanding of what happens at and after death. And the main reason it was really pretty easy to do is the evidence was so abundant and so consistent. And then in the early 90s, I discovered the amazing Robert Monroe, and it was only then that I really understood what I'd been missing. There was a depth of understanding of how it all fit together that I never got until Bob Monroe's books. Bob Monroe was a fearless and he was a ruthlessly truth-based astral traveler. He was someone who learned at midlife how to leave his body, and then he spent the rest of his life pushing and pushing the boundaries, learning more and more about altered states of consciousness and how to travel really everywhere. He spent a lot of time in places that are not material, and he spent a lot of time himself not being material. It's amazing what he learned and what he was able to teach people. His 3 books that document his explorations and discoveries were literally seminal for me. I could not be doing the work I'm doing today if it hadn't been for him and his books. His books are these. They're Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and Ultimate Journey. I urge you to read those books and read them in order because, A, they're a lot of fun to read, but B, you'll find out things about how everything fits together that really wouldn't make sense to you otherwise. Bob Monroe established the Monroe Institute in the foothills of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains, and he assembled and trained astral travelers that he called his explorers. And they've wrote some books too, and their books are also fascinating to read. And everything is very consistent with what the dead tell us. It's just that we would never see how it fits together without these books and this work that they did. After his death, his work continues at the Monroe Institute, which is in the foothills of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. He established it. I think it was his summer home or something. Then it became his retirement home, and now it's this wonderful, wonderful place where his work carries on. And I'm really excited to be able to introduce to you what we call TMI, the Monroe Institute. This is long overdue because it's been very, I think, important in my work, and it's doing essential work now. And it's also something which many people listening probably would be interested in exploring further. So this is overdue. I apologize that we're late in doing this, but today we're going to try to remedy some of that. Our guest today is Dr. Scott Taylor. Scott is the current president and executive director of the Monroe Institute. He's been a trainer for TMI for more than 30 years, so he knew Bob Monroe.
What does it mean to be human? And what does it mean to be able to connect with our loved ones who passed over, and all of the other kinds of experiences that are available to me in the non-physical world?
So was this at the same time doing his first group of explorers, some of them who've written books? Bruce Bowen is the one I'm most familiar with. Was this the same time he was working there, doing all this?
Mm-hmm. It was. I did my gateway in 1983, and then did that program and came back and did a couple more programs, guidelines and lifelines, and it's so affected me. It profoundly affected me that I decided I needed to be able to share this gift with others, and so I became what's known as an outreach trainer, working with people around the state of Minnesota where I lived at the time, and providing weekend workshops to introduce people to the meditations that are the Monroe Institute and to the binaural beat technology, which he invented, called Hemisync, that allows us to not only enter into these states of awareness, but to hold us there for a long enough period so that we could learn how to be in that space and then be able to navigate around it and actually have enough time to do some really significant traveling. And so I've been training for them in one capacity or another since 1985.
Wow. Well, the binaural beat technology, the Hemisync, is something which I'd like you to explain to people because most people aren't familiar with it. But it's being used to help people get into, as you say, an altered state of consciousness in a lot of different fields. We've had Rochelle Wright here, for example, and she uses it or something very similar to it when she helps people to connect in the astral with their loved ones who've gone ahead of them, and that works beautifully. She's anyone who's interested, look up Rochelle Wright. We've talked with her a couple of times, I think, or three, on Seek Reality, and the work she does is wonderful, and it's very directly connected with this. She uses the same principles to get people into an altered state of consciousness so they can have these meetings. But talk about the Hemisync and how that works.
Sure. It's based on a really simple principle, which is that if you play a solid tone into one ear, say at 100 hertz, and you play a slightly different tone into the other ear, say 104 hertz, and usually that's delivered with headphones, so they're separated. So you're hearing one ear at 100, the other ear is 104. What the brain does is it tries to equalize those two tones. Well, it can't because they're inherently different. And then the brain does this really unusual thing, which is that it then sets up a third tone that moves between the hemispheres. That's the difference between the two. So in this case, it would be 4. So 100, 104, the difference is 4. And then the brain starts to hear this tone of 4 and begins to vibrate at that particular frequency, which is the frequency of deep sleep in this case. And what the genius of Bob Monroe was that he took this old technology, it was discovered back in the 1880s, and what he figured out was that you could layer these binaural beats. Now the brain would hear 2. It would hear a beat at 4, and it would hear another beat at 12 hertz, which is awake. And all of a sudden you have, as you listen to the tones, you have the state of mind awake and body asleep, which is the jumping off point that Bob Monroe used for all of his early explorations into the non-physical universe. He did it by the way of out-of-body experiences, but there's lots of ways to experience expanded states of awareness. He chose that one because it was easy for him, but there's others. But this idea that if you're wearing headphones and you're a willing participant, these tones will put you into that state of awareness and they'll hold you there for as long as you want. And usually when we do exercises, about 40 minutes is a good amount of time. You could go longer, you can go shorter, but it holds you there nicely so you get used to being in the state of awareness and then begin to practice using some of the tools that we give people for how to navigate in that space and how to have questions answered and how to communicate with non-physical entities, on and on. And so that winds up being a really helpful tool, this binaural beat technology, for entering into and exploring non-physical states.
I can't remember the name of his book, but Bruce Bowen wrote a wonderful book, which I remember because he was so fearless in it. He was doing things like journeying out of body to the center of the physical earth to connect something there. I don't remember what he was connecting there, but I thought, oh my goodness. But yet that's quite possible, because if he was in non-physical reality, that was not a problem at all. Of course that would be possible. So I sort of was fascinated with him. And then one day, I don't know, must have been 8 or 9 years ago, I was giving a presentation at a Unity Church in Florida, and I saw him standing there, and it was like seeing Elvis, because I had been, as you know, he's sort of a distinctive, or he has passed since, but he had a distinctive look about him. And I went up to him and started talking to him and gushing because I was such a fan, and he thought I was crazy at the time. But we did invite him to be part of some of the work we were doing and give some presentations. And one of the things he did was a wonderful workshop on rescuing spirits that have gone off track. And I know that's a big thing that they've been doing at TMI. Can you talk a little about that?
Absolutely. The program that you're referring to, we call Lifeline.
Yes.
And in the Lifeline course, what we do is invite people to enter into expanded states of awareness and have a non-physical helper, a guide, that comes with us and helps us locate souls that are, maybe they're lost or confused, or they're tied to the physical world in some way. Maybe they don't even know they're dead. Happens frequently with soldiers or people who die very quickly, and to talk to them and say, there's a place where you can go, where you can be with your relatives. Would you like to go there? And the challenge in the Lifeline course is to be so that they can continue on their journey. It's also, as it turns out, a really interesting way to connect with pieces of ourselves that maybe we have put aside, that we haven't fully embraced, or we left behind because of some sort of change that we had to make within ourselves, because maybe our job. And so it has kind of a dual purpose. So we
someone is saying, for heaven's sake, what is all that about? We left pieces of ourselves behind. So I would be good if you just said a little bit about that and how it happens and how they would know if it's happened. This is a whole different topic we could spend a whole hour talking about, but please just maybe talk a little bit about that we can, this rescuing of a part of ourselves that maybe was separated.
Oh, sure. One of the people that I worked with here at the Institute, his name is Stephen. He's a big guy, and he's about 280 pounds with zero fat. He's really,
wow.
He's really strong. He's really big, and early in his life, he decided that he wanted to have a career in the military, and so he joined and became members of Special Forces. And then after he finished his career in the military, he became a member of the police SWAT team. And wow. You get kind of the drift in his life. But Stephen has a really soft part to him, and a place that's very vulnerable. And he had to set that part of himself aside in order to be a soldier, in order to be a SWAT team member, because he couldn't have his radar out there so fully as an empath would. And he had that part of himself, but he had to shut it down and leave it aside so he could be a successful soldier and a successful SWAT team member. And it wasn't until he came here to the Institute and was reintroduced to that part of himself that he realized that he had left it aside, and now he needed to reintegrate that back into himself. So he became the fuller Stephen, the one that he was destined to be. So
well, how did he find this piece again? I mean, where had it been?
We do an exercise here where you can, because a lot of the time we spent in expanded states of awareness is outside of time and space.
Yes.
You can actually go to a place, we call it the Council of Self, where you can talk to yourself at various stages in your life. And in his case, he was transported into a place where there was a circle of Stevens. They were sitting there. And as he entered into the circle, the 8-year-old Stephen walked right up to him and poked him in the chest and said, "Don't you remember what we used to do?" And he was like, "What?" He said, "Don't you remember what we used to do on Saturday mornings?" And he was mystified. And of course, the 8-year-old Stephen said, "We used to go to the seashore. And when we were at the seashore, we'd fly kites. And that whole morning, we would fly kites with the wind that was coming off of the sea. And we would become one with the sea and the sand. And essentially, this young Stephen at 8 years old was having a unity experience every Saturday morning as Stephen remembered what that was and what that was like. And now when Stephen travels, the very first thing into his suitcase is a kite. And so he now goes all over the world with his business, and he flies a kite everywhere he goes.
Oh, my goodness. What a beautiful story.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes. But these are the kinds of things, everyone, that the Monroe Institute does, because it is so comfortable, because of this brilliant founder, Bob Monroe, and the things that he sort of started. What carries forward now is a place which is very comfortable with going into altered states of consciousness, with going out of the physical altogether into the astral, with doing things like sitting in a circle with yourself at different ages of your life and reconnecting with more completely with who you are. These are the kinds of things they do there. This is so cutting edge. It hasn't even basically probably arrived yet. It's so cutting edge. This is more and more how people are going to be growing and learning and becoming whole and becoming healthy in another 50, 100 years. It's amazing to me what you folks do.
Well, thank you. And we think we've developed quite a lovely system for introducing people to expanded states of awareness that are gentle and are immersive. We also it's just a ton of fun to do.
It's fun. Yes, that's right. It really is. And if it's not fun, we shouldn't do it, is my attitude. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And you know, most of our courses have about 20 people in them, plus or minus. And you get to spend the week with 20 people who are doing exactly the same thing you are doing. And you get to share your experiences, and you get to hang out with folks that are exactly in the space that you are. And it's so nice to be able to just let your guard down and not have to worry about explaining why you want to explore this. Everybody gets it. And the energetic that's involved with 20 people doing exactly the same thing at the same time really helps propel you into this space. So it has kind of a double lovely whammy as you are able to do the kind of work we do here, and you get to have fun with another whole group of people while you're being guided by some true professionals. I have to do hats off to the trainers that we have here, because they're remarkable to a person. They're really wonderful guides.
So tell us now, what are some of these programs? So if someone's saying, gee, that sounds like something I'd like to try, Where would they start, and what might be other programs they might progress to then from the beginning?
We have a couple of programs where people usually start. Number one is what we call Gateway, and this is a program that Bob developed, and it's been introduced 40 years ago, and we have refined it along the way, and it is the premier program for doing the exploration of expanded states of awareness, exploration of consciousness. This is a great place to go because we give you 4 portals to explore and to start. And if anybody asks me, I say, Gateway, that's a great place. The second course that people will often come to here, because Bob Monroe is famous for out-of-body explorations in what is now known as the classic out-of-body. And it's only known that because he was like Raymond Moody that you mentioned in your intro. Bob Monroe coined the term out-of-body experience, and because he wrote about it first, he got to define what an out-of-body experience is. And so people will come to the class that we have designed specifically to teach people about how to do the classic out-of-body experience. And
what would be the definition? You said he can't, because I just think of it as you leave your body and you start flying around with a silver cord attached, but I know that's a very sort of naive view. What was his definition of an out-of-body experience?
No, that's not a naive view. That's how he traveled in the first 10 years. Well, you mentioned he wrote 3 books.
Yes.
And each one of them encompassed a decade's worth of exploration in the non-physical universe. And in that first book, that first decade, that's how he traveled. It was an energetic duplicate of his physical body. It was attached with a silver cord, and he went around the non-physical universe with this energetic body that had arms and legs and limbs.
Right.
Well, in the second 10 years, he said, you know what, it takes a lot of effort to drag this thing around all the time, this energetic body, so I'm not going to do that anymore. And he just traveled what he called like a teardrop of energy. And he didn't form it into anything, but he used this teardrop of energy as his vehicle for, again, traveling around the non-physical universe. And then in the last 10 years of his life that he wrote about in Ultimate Journey, he said, you know what, I don't even have to do that. I can just travel as a point of consciousness. And that's another way that he traveled around the universe. And so when we teach out-of-body experiences now, we talk about each one of these 3. And some people are really adept at the first, where you have this duplicate of your energetic body. And some are to the second. We have a whole lot of people, me included, that just travel as a point of consciousness. You project your consciousness outside of your physical body, and off you go.
Amazing.
And frankly, it's a whole lot easier than the classic.
Yes.
And so that's and then there's steps in between those. So we call it phasing now. Instead of out-of-body experience, we talk about phasing into consciousness. And it's learnable, and in some cases it's really easy to learn. We have an exercise where we teach people how to bilocate. So you have 2 separate consciousnesses. So one is in your physical body, and the other is out tooling around in the non-physical universe. That's actually quite easy to learn. It feels a lot like when you're daydreaming, where you're sitting in your chair somewhere, and you're sitting in a chair, but your consciousness is off there with your spouse at the football game.
You're right. It is easy. When Bruce taught this workshop about doing rescue work, I told him in the beginning, I have never done anything. I've never been out of body. I'm like a Luddite. I know nothing about anything. And that's who I am. I mean, I'm just a scholar. I'm not an actual doer. He said, I'm sure you'll be able to do it. No way. Well, he sort of put us into, I don't even know quite how, but he put us into this state where we were, he said, if you open your inner eye or something like that, you'll be able to see that you're traveling. Well, I was like on a dirt road, and there's somebody with you. You know what? There was somebody with me. I was boggled by that. And he had me decide what the person should look like, and I was feeling a little freaked out. So I decided to make him look like a turn of the 20th century kid in knickers, like about 10. And that's what he looked like. And he took us to, this little boy took me to this place where we went through a gate, and there were all overgrown hedges, and then we were in an old courtyard, and there was a woman sitting at a spinning wheel, and she couldn't see him, but she could see me. It all happened for real, but it happened in my mind, and I just couldn't get over it. I actually rescued this woman, and basically, as soon as I got her to see him, I was told he had told us in advance how to handle this. As soon as you get the person being rescued to see the person with you, that's the real guy doing the work. So just step back. So I pointed out the kid in knickers, and she saw the kid in knickers then, and he took her hand and he led her to this looked like early 1800s village. And there were all these actually nicely dressed young people standing around, and they all loved her and welcomed her. And I said to the little boy who was standing next to me, I said, "Who are all those people?" "Those are her children. They've been waiting for her for a long time," he said. Oh my goodness, I had chills from that. And he, by the way, didn't talk like a little boy. He talked like what he was, which was a very advanced being. I hope he didn't think I was awful to make him look like a 10-year-old. But the point is, if I could do it, anybody listening can do it. That's what I want to stress. This is amazingly easy. It's just that we don't think we can. I think that's the whole problem. Don't you? I mean, why do most people not do this normally?
I think you're right. It's that you don't realize that this is a possibility, and then somebody has told you, "Oh, this is hard. It's special. Right. Only certain people can do it. You have to sit and meditate against a wall for 20 years." No, you don't. That's one of the beautiful things that Bob Monroe taught us, was that this is part of our birthright, and what we need to do is just learn the skill of focusing our attention. Here at the Monroe Institute, these various states of expanded awareness are called focus levels for exactly that reason, that what we're learning to do is to just focus our awareness on that space where people are lost and confused, like you did with the woman who was at the spinning wheel. Or maybe you want to talk to the dead relatives, or maybe you want to travel over into the next town to see what's going on. These are like different states of awareness, and they're all available all the time. He used to tell me that that at the beginning he got scared and he didn't know where he was, which makes total sense, because Here he is, a Methodist from Virginia who's right. Which has been thrust into this world of the non-physical, and there's no real context, so he's feeling his way around and he doesn't know what to expect. But after you've done it a little bit, like he did, this is okay, it's safe, I can come back. And then he had some reinforcement from other people who do the same thing. And then I loved what he told me, which was, and then something even more devastating happened to me, and that was curiosity.
Yeah, right.
And it was that curiosity. Once he realized that he was powerful in this space, and that he was protected in that space, and he was guided in that space, then, wow, let's see what's here. And You're right. It's courage, but it was driven by this intense curiosity. And that is what we hope to ignite in everyone that comes here. Is let's let's have fun and explore and play at the same time.
Yeah, he was quite playful. In the books, as you read the books, it comes out in odd ways, but you realize whatever he's doing, he's having a really good time doing it. But it's still, think about being the first one in modern times who's really intensively doing this stuff, or you don't know anybody else who's really doing it. I mean, what a pioneer he was. Quite a remarkable man. Was he that enjoyable in person as he seems to be in his books?
He was indeed a playful man, and a man. It's one of those people that you meet and you go, "Wow, what an interesting guy!" And at the same time, you have this sense of a deep wisdom that comes from experience, and it comes from being really comfortable in his own skin. And there are remarkably few people who are like that, and it's a privilege when you run into one.
Yes, yes. So if someone has done the Gateway program or some preliminary program, where would they go beyond that? What are some of the possibilities of exploration that you offer at sort of higher levels of advancement?
So we offer 36 classes right now, and I'm not going to run.
Wow. Wow.
Where I often tell people, it's like, well, what are you interested in? And for me, I wanted to touch that space again and to see Nolan and his mother and my dead relatives. That was really important to me. And so there's a course here called Guidelines where you can connect with your guidance and connect with those people who are on the other side. We've mentioned Lifeline, which is the program that's all about soul retrieval and finding those parts of ourselves. There's a couple interesting programs. One's called Timeline, where you get to explore who you have been in all of your lives that you are living, and how they influence each other, and how you send information back and forth to yourself from various lifetimes. So that's a fascinating program. Another one that I really like is called Heartline, and it's about discovering who you are as a loving, playful human being.
As you say, it's playful science. I mean, what could be more fun than experimenting with what your own mind is able to do that you never knew it could do? I mean, that's thrilling fun. My goodness.
And one of the things that you may not know is that we have a wonderful academic collaboration with the University of Virginia. We have two of the members of the Department of Perceptual Studies that are here on staff. So they're, physically here on campus some of the time, and some of the time at UVA. And we are studying all kinds of really interesting things. And right now we're working on subtle energy and how to measure that using the equipment that is now available, some of which is really sophisticated. That's great fun. We're doing some really cool reverse engineering things. So we hook people up to EEGs and say, okay, and we watch them to see what happens with their brain and their brain waves as they do remote viewing, for instance, or have a unity experience, and go, oh, look what happened. Can we take these binaural beats and customize them so we can get people into a portal that's close to, say, remote viewing? And that's really interesting work that is ongoing. So this work is experiential, like with the Gateway program. You go out there and explore, and at the same time we're doing some really hardcore science that people can point to in journals and go, here it is. This is what's
very excited. I had forgotten about you would be able to work very well with the UVA, where even Ian Stevenson's pioneer program in reincarnation, a specific kind of it, was done, and they still do work with. So what an exciting time this must be for you, that you're doing all of this really on the frontier work, which is going to be mainstream so soon. And I'm jealous. I'm not jealous usually of guests, but I'm jealous of you. You're in a wonderful position.
I am in a wonderful position, and I would like to just put out there that it's becoming more mainstream than we think. I'm back on near-death experiences now. So in the very last Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter has a near-death experience where he goes up to the train station and he talks with the deceased Dumbledore about how the world works and what he's going to do when he gets back into the physical. So it's a beautiful characterization of what a near-death experience is like. And I have another one for you. I don't know, Roberta, but say 10 years ago, do you remember what the image was, the icon for death? Say like at New Year's. Do you remember what it was?
Well, the Grim Reaper, maybe. Something.
The Grim Reaper, exactly. It was this hooded cloak figure with a tie, and it was very ominous. Well, now, that Grim Reaper is totally gone from our collective conscious. It has disappeared from our culture, and it's been replaced by the light at the end of the tunnel.
That's true when you think about it, isn't it?
And so this kind of work has really is now part of our society at large, and people are not as afraid or wary or even skeptical of it. It's now accepted, and it's up to us to convince people to give it a try. And
But everyone, monroeinstitute.org, and we will invite Scott back. You and I have so much more to talk about, and I'd like to go more deeply into some of your programs and so on. I want people to experience this, because once you have had these experiences, you don't have to wait to have your own near-death or transformative experience. This will change your life a lot. Getting into what your mind really is and what it can do changes your life. So monroeinstitute.org. Everybody, just go and explore what they can help you do. And thank you so much, Scott Taylor, who is the president of the Monroe Institute. And as I say, we're going to have you back, dear. Won't be long.
Thank you, Roberta.
So everyone, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so glad you could be with us. Isn't this been fun? Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began and you never will end. And when you really get what that means, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest here for the second time will be the extraordinary young Dutch consciousness researcher, Dr. Bernardo Kastrup. I love this beautiful young man. He had a PhD in computer engineering with specialization in artificial intelligence, reconfigurable computing, and so on. He was working at CERN. He was really having a wonderful career, but then he came to understand more and more that consciousness really is the source of reality, as, of course, Max Planck told us it is. So he set about getting another PhD from a leading Dutch university, and this one is in ontology, the study of existence and the philosophy of mind. If you haven't seen Bernardo's defense of his second PhD thesis, you've got a treat in store. Just Google Bernardo Kastrup, K-A-S-T-R-U-P, second PhD defense, and it should just come right up. Eventually, if there is any justice in the world, our dear, beautiful young friend, he's just in his early 40s now, so there's time. He's going to win the Nobel Prize in Physics for his consciousness theory of everything. He will solve it all. Dr. Bernardo Kastrup is a genuine star. He's a brilliant man, and he's just a beautiful human being. And he's going to be with us again next week, all the way from Holland. This week, we've been speaking with Dr. Scott Taylor. He's the president and executive director of the Monroe Institute. And these are some of my favorite favorite people. The Monroe Institute is the legacy of the great 20th century astral voyager, the wonderful Robert Monroe. You're going to hear his name more in the future because his time has really not even yet begun. And he's been dead, I guess, for 20 years, 30 years. But if you haven't read his books, put them first on your list. These books are fun. You get to do this voyaging with him and figure it out with him. It's so exciting. Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, Ultimate Journey. Those are his 3 books. I read all 3 in the 90s, and they transformed my work and my life. They were groundbreaking for me, and they will be, I think, for you. The Monroe Institute continues his work. And in expanding human consciousness, it builds on what his basis was. And this week, we've, of course, been visiting with its president, Scott Taylor. They're actually, Scott, doing more than I ever dreamed that they were, and even working with UVA. What a great place to be. As I say, I kind of envy you that you get to be there. Dr. Taylor has been a trainer for TMI for more than 30 years. And the Monroe Institute is actually one of the most important organizations that's now working in this whole broad field of better understanding what's truly going on, and better using the powers of our own minds. As you know, my nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Growing Forever, The Fun of Living Together, and soon The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity that Jesus taught. We have a children's book, too. I just heard from another woman whose children love my book called The Fun of Meeting Jesus, and one of them identifies as one of the characters. All of these books are available through bookstores or on Amazon, and the adult books are available as audiobooks. And if you want to talk to me, if you want to talk about any of my books or ask questions or anything at all, you can always contact me through the contact block on RobertaGrimes.com. I do answer every email, so please be sure to give me your correct email address. Past episodes of Seek Reality are available on webtalkradio.net, realrevolutionradio.com, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and a number of other stations, including the wonderful Dream Vision 7 radio family. And more people are telling me now that they've got the app for free from the iTunes App Store, and Seek Reality just comes to them every week, which I think is really nice and easy. If there's anything you ever want to talk to me about at all, don't hesitate to reach out. I want to emphasize that because I hear from people every day, and it enriches my life when I hear from you. So don't hesitate to do that. Meanwhile, this has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy and please make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you in particular, you are infinitely loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.